Hello, team. It's me, Jonathan MS Pearce. I am speaking to you from the south of England to give you a Ukraine war update, a news update concerning the military aid news. There's a lot of that coming through because it's a Ramstein meeting taking place. And also, I'm going to talk to you concerning geopolitical news nuggets. And I may get your man Greg Terry dropping into the live to speak to us about the delivery of the snatched Land Rovers that we all fundraised for, many of us fundraised for, way back when, and that is now come to fruition. He is delivering those. It is a fantastic moment there. So he's literally driving right now en route to in doing that. So maybe he'll drop in to speak to us at some point over the course of this video, and that's why he's on the thumbnail. And I find it incredible that the amount of content that I produce, that there are still people saying this, never miss a video. Some of you are absolutely dedicated and you need a medal for just being able to put up with my boring old voice for as long as you guys do. Someone said yesterday, I can't stop listening to you, it's a bit like crack. I'm like, well, interesting. Maybe I should go and get out on the streets or the inner city streets of the UK and just talk geopolitics, and maybe all the crack addicts would just stop using, and then just come around and we'll just come like the Pied Piper of Birmingham or something. Come on, guys, gather around. Let's speak geopolitics, and maybe it might just set them on the right path. Or I could just reintegrate with reality. Right. Okay. So we are going to speak about military aid to begin with. And oh, for goodness me, yes, somebody's saying it's Friday night. Of course, some people, it will be Friday night. We're going to start not quite with the military aid, because actually I just want to add on to something I said in the news piece this morning, which is that Pavlohrad was hit this morning. It was actually hit supposedly with 5 ballistic missiles, and there are claims that there might well have been North Korean ballistic missiles. Oh, I did have a quote from someone else, but actually they could have been the KN-23 ballistic missiles. And that is pretty terrible. There are already 100 people injured, and the ages of the victims range from 4 to 86 years old. I think more now, and I think one person has died in that. So yeah, pretty horrific strikes on what looks like civilian infrastructure again, at that time in Pavlohrad. And we also have something where I'm not going to show you this video, but it's another, just be warned, whenever you see videos like this, question them. This is supposedly 2 Ukrainian soldiers with their nice blue bands on there to tell you who they are, trying to give humanitarian aid to some old babushka. And the babushka says, no, I'm not accepting it. You shot half the village, blah, blah, blah. And the way it's filmed and just everything about this is fake. It's just fake, fake, fake. So be warned about that and any of these sorts of videos. Yeah. And what else? Worth noting that if you're in the UK, on the BBC, a new series or TV show about the president of Ukraine is due to start on Wednesday, the 4th of September. That's been and gone. So actually, have I missed that? So it might well be already on the BBC. The Zelenskyy story, comedian, actor, president, war leader, in his own words, the extraordinary life of one of the world's most recognizable leaders, and how war in Ukraine changed everything. So I have not seen that. So if that's already out on the BBC, or at least an initial episode of that, let me know if you've watched it, if you are in the UK. Get yourself to a VPN, watch that, and let me know what you think. Right, let's go to military aid to begin with. I'm just going to get rid of those tabs that I have gone through, and we'll go back to military aid over here. We're going to start with this bit of news, which I think is pretty important. Good to see that you can all hear me. There's no issues there. Okay. Now, the Biden administration apparently is in urgent talks with Congress to secure the use of $6 billion in military aid for Ukraine before the September the 30th deadline. As much of the $7.8 billion allocated in April remains unused. The administration hopes to extend the presidential drawdown authority. So remember, that's when the US can draw from its own stocks that's already been manufactured, sitting around in warehouses, not being used. Take that and give it straight to Ukraine, and then use another fund to backfill their their lack of those stocks, maybe with the same, maybe with different, maybe with not as much of. So it could be that you've got 10,000 of these types of missiles, but strategically you look at what your army is doing, or Air Force or whatever, and you say, actually, we only need 5,000 of those. So we give 10,000 to Ukraine, we can then restock our inventory with 5,000. So it's not, it's not always, it doesn't have to be one-to-one. But also it's worth reminding, and I know I've said this a million times, you take that stuff out of the warehouses, that's been bought and paid for. Okay, so that is actually costing you nothing to give that to Ukraine. It has a book value, and the book value is only really an opportunity cost if you are going to sell that to another nation. And if you're not going to sell it, then even that value, in fact, it will cost you to, when they become obsolete, to decommission those weapons. So oftentimes they're saving money in giving this stuff to Ukraine. Obviously, you're going to have to pay transport costs, etc., etc. So anyway, it just gives you an idea of how the finances work. So the key mechanism for providing defense support by attaching it to a short-term emergency spending bill to prevent the funds from expiring with the fiscal year. Now, Reuters reports this as follows, and I think this is important because it blows my mind that they hadn't considered this, and then suddenly we're on September the 6th, and they're like, oh my goodness, we need to spend this. Like, where's the forethought and foresight? US President Joe Biden's administration is engaged in urgent discussions with Congress to allow it to use up to $6 billion in military aid for Ukraine by September the 30th. Effort comes at high risk moment for Ukrainian forces as they're advancing into Kursk, etc., etc. Presidential drawdown authority is a key component of the $61 billion aid package and allows the US to transfer defense articles from stocks. It's been one of the primary mechanisms. However, most of the $7.8 billion in PDA, I'm summarizing here somewhat, in the bill Biden signed into law in April has not been used, leaving officials scrambling to find a way to keep the remaining $6 billion from expiring on September the 30th deadline, the end of the 2024 financial fiscal year. Sources close in negotiations told Reuters that the State Department hopes to attach an extension of the PDA authorities to a continuing resolution, a short-term emergency spending bill that the Senate and House of Representatives must pass this month to avoid a September the 30th government shutdown. Okay, so there's maybe a couple of things going on there, which is they don't actually want to spend it now. And the reason they don't want to spend it now is because it might be the last bill if Trump gets voted in, if Harris doesn't get voted in. So it might be that the Congress won't get to pass another bill. And so therefore they've got to make this one last as long as possible. It needs to go past September the 30th. And that's why they might want to sign an extension rather than spend it. Now, if it comes to having to spend it by the end of September the 30th, that doesn't also necessarily mean, as far as I understand it, that they have to give that stuff away in that kind of time period, or at least start the ball rolling. I think they just need to apportion certain stuff and value it, and that gets the kind of go ahead. And I don't know whether you can change that kind of post hoc after the 30th. But anyway, congressional aide said it was not fully clear why the flow of weapons to Ukraine has slowed this year. I think that's probably political, with the US administration, so Biden administration, not wanting to be seen to give lots of equipment to Ukraine during this campaign period where the Republicans might weaponize that as a political attack on the Democrats, saying that they're concentrating more on Ukraine than on domestic issues. I personally, that makes a lot of sense to me. But yeah, it said it's partly due to the US Department of Defense concern its own stocks were being depleted as the weapons industry struggles with supply chain issues. Lawmakers who back Ukraine from both parties stress the importance of continuing the support. Quote, bipartisan support for Ukraine is critical to American interests, and we will do whatever we can in 2024 to build on the successes and secure additional future military aid necessary to maintain the momentum, said Democratic Senator Blumenthal and Republican Senator Lindsey Graham in a statement last month. Anyway, yeah, basically the aid has dropped from the US to Ukraine compared to previous years, same time. And so this is a concern. As mentioned, I think it's political. It's really important this does get sorted. The Ukrainian Review moving on, says Ramstein is well, they don't say that. Ramstein is happening at the moment. So the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, where you've got 50 odd allies meeting together in Ramstein in Germany to work out exactly what Ukraine needs and what the allies can get and give. So, quote from Zelenskyy, Ramstein, we need the determination of our partners and a means to stop Russian air terror. We need all the weapons from the already announced support packages to finally reach the combat brigades. And we need long-range decisions. Okay, so that's going to be about lifting restrictions. Due to meet with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz today, according to AFP, Agence France Presse, Zelenskyy is traveling to attend the Ramstein meeting. So that will be useful if he can, I'm sure, but I don't know what extra Scholz can do other than release the Taurus, and I don't think that's going to happen. US has announced today that they are going to give another $250 million aid package for Ukraine. That's the sort of amount that we've seen regularly, that normally comprises artillery ammunition and the usual bits and pieces, HIMARS ammunition, etc., etc. Quote, I'm pleased to say that President Biden will announce today an additional $250 million security assistance package for Ukraine, said Lloyd Austin at Ramstein. The Department of Defense, says Colby Badwa, has realigned $550 million in previously reprogrammed replacement funds from the Ukraine supplemental to procure JASSM ERs. So these are extended range, the cruise missile that the US use air to ground, LRASMs and JSMs for the US Air Force. So again, this goes back to money that is coming from the Ukraine supplemental is often used to buy stuff for the US. And they will, if they're giving stuff away through presidential drawdown authority, then they are often getting a replacement that is better than what they're giving away, because you've got newer technology, newer versions of the weapons you're giving away. You often give away older iterations of whatever it is. And so this is just a way of using a Ukraine supplemental bill to upgrade the American inventory and therefore the American capabilities. This is what needs to be sold to the US population and also US congressional naysayers. This is to replace harms provided to Ukraine. This is a great example. So the US is going to look at strategically what their inventory is and say, right, we've given, I'm going to make this up, but we've given 5,000 harms missiles to Ukraine. So these are anti-radiation missiles you fire from a plane to take out a radar installation for an air defense system, for example. You say, right, we've given 5,000 harms, but actually we don't need this many harms. So we're going to use that money that we've apportioned to backfilling what we give away to Ukraine by getting in more JASSMs and LRASMs and JSMs. And that will put us in a better, that will actually mean that we're in strategically a better position to commit to any kind of war that we think is going to happen in the near future, because actually we're balancing our inventory in a much more beneficial way. So hopefully that makes sense. If the US does draw down some expired AGM-158A baseline JASSMs to Ukraine, the US Air Force stands to get even more funding for new missiles. Again, same point. Okay, then we're going to give some of these cruise missiles to Ukraine, but then we'll use some of this funding that is part of the $61 billion funding package to basically upgrade our JASSM inventory. Right. So Germany, Canada, and actually other nations now pledged howitzers, rockets, and more to Ukraine. Canada and Germany announced new military donations to Ukraine as the allies gather for the Ramstein group. So let's look at some of these details. Okay, so we know the US is providing $250 million aid package. Germany, Denmark, and Netherlands will provide, and I presume this is a further set of tanks here. But this is really good because although these are Leopard 105s, they're not the newest Leopard 2, and they're not the newest iteration of Leopard 2. So they've been getting Leopard 2A4s, 5s, and 6s, and now we're up to Leopard 2A7s, I think. Anyway, this is Leopard 1, so this is more equivalent to some of the older Soviet-era tanks, but as long as they're getting upgraded with fire control systems and optics, then they have the advantage over the Russian systems, so that they can, if you see the enemy before they see you, you have the advantage. So one of the key components of any vehicle that the US or allies or Germany here and Denmark and Netherlands send to Ukraine, one of the key aspects is what the optics like? Can you allow the crew to spot the enemy before the enemy can spot you? And so if you might have an older tank, but it might be able to acquire targets quicker than the Soviet era tanks, and it's still an old tank, but still does a good job. Okay, so that's good. 77 Leopard 185s. I don't know what the time frame on that would be, and I presume that is over and above what has already been promised. Canada will provide a large batch of engines for unguided aircraft missiles and 1,300 warheads for them. I wonder if this has anything to do with the Palencia rocket drone or something like that, where actually Canada's providing the engines and the warheads, so most of the important components for them. But it's certainly for something along those lines, isn't it? And Germany will supply Ukraine, and this is doing a lot of the rounds at the moment. Germany will supply Ukraine with 12 more Panzer Howitzer 2000 self-propelled artillery systems. That's really useful. Also, the European Commission has allocated 40 million euros for Ukraine's energy infrastructure. So the question is, when are they going to get this stuff? So German aid to Ukraine, always on point, says now that the German MOD has clarified its information at the request of the German journalist Thomas Wiegold, I can happily report that Germany will indeed supply Ukraine with 12 Panzer Howitzer 2000s worth 150 million euros, in addition to the 18 already ordered since and I presume provided since February 2024. The delivery, so no, actually those are ordered, those other ones as well. So here is the schedule. In 2024, so in the remaining 3 months, they are due to get 6 Panzer Howitzer 2000s. In 2025, another 6, and 2026 and 2027, 18. So actually, this is great news, but I presume that the backlog and the time it takes to build these things, this is a long-term provision of aid to Ukraine. It's great, it's brilliant. The question is, do they need them like now rather than 2027? Okay, the UK has come along and said they are going to supply 650 lightweight multi-role missiles, LLM systems, to Ukraine to boost the country's air defense capabilities. The package costs $213 million. The air defense package will be announced today at Ramstein. Now, these are able to be used. These are Martlet missiles able to be used and due to be delivered by the end of the year on both man-pads, so shoulder-mounted, or indeed sometimes you have I think with the Martlet, the Starstreak systems, you can have 3 of those, and I think I don't know that it's the same missile, but anyway, so you can have the shoulder-mounted version, you can have one on sort of tripod, you can have 3 mounted, you can put them on vehicles, and indeed the SHORAD, the short-range air defense system, the HVM Stormer, which is actually doing a pretty good job by all accounts in Ukraine, uses these missiles as well. So you often see them shooting down Shahed drones as well. So really good news from the UK. They're providing extra stuff. They've also put in a massive order for 152 millimeter artillery ammunition. So the UK has actually come up with the goods this week in a really substantial way. So 650 of these, the sort of calls them an analog to the Hellfire rocket there, but 650 of those rockets will be super useful for the Ukrainians, obviously. Right, okay, now moving on, Sweden will allocate $49 million to support heating and electricity supply in Ukraine. This is going to be super important given the onset of winter at some point over the next couple of months. The aid is aimed at covering the needs of the most vulnerable people in the country, according to the Swedish government's website. Now, we're going to get on to some controversial topics here. And what am I talking about? Of course, the restrictions on US weaponry being fired into Russia. And I'm going to drink some tea. Thank you very much. Right. Okay. ATACMS scarcity influences the US ban on Ukraine's deep strikes inside Russia, according to Pentagon's spokesperson, Sabrina Singh. She also stressed minimal strategic impact due to 90% of Russian airfields being out of range, alongside concerns over escalation. Okay, so now we're adding another reason that the US is giving for not allowing ATACMS to be used deep into Russia. The idea is that, one, they actually don't have that many ATACMS. To be fair, whether that's true or not in terms of actually they could give a load more and it won't strategically harm the the US reserves. I don't know, but they certainly, I don't think, have been using them. I think Ukraine has not used ATACMS much for the last month. So I'm guessing they probably don't have many ATACMS at the moment, if any. So the claim is that a lack of ATACMS is causing the US, at least partly causing the US, to keep those restrictions in place. And also that 90% of the Russian airfields are out of range. Well, yeah, they're out of range now, but those planes were in range when Ukraine was really needing to fire at them. So that's annoying. And also that 10% that's left is still really significant. And it's not just about airfields, right? It's about all of these other targets within Russia that would be incredibly useful for the Ukrainians to be able to hit. So I don't really buy that, but really it's probably this last one that's most important. And alongside complaints or worries about, worries about escalation, and that's probably doing a lot of the heavy lifting in that calculation, right? Alongside what Singh has said, Zelenskyy is now confirmed, Jen Kiev says, Ukraine's allies are now withholding ATACMS and Storm Shadows and refusing to allow Ukraine to strike Russia's launches and airfields. So Zelenskyy himself said these operations allowed us to return security to the Black Sea. Oh, let's go back actually a little bit. Goodness me, this is a massively long one. But I think it's probably worth going through this, see what Zelenskyy thinks. So if you don't mind, let's go through Zelensky's address. So today I address the Ramstein contact group. Ukraine stands firm in the face of Russian aggression. Our brigades are holding the line in Donetsk region, Pokrovsk and Toretsk, and the strength of our agreements must swiftly transform into the strength of our warriors. 1 month ago, our military launched an operation to Kursk region of Russia, where Putin was preparing to expand his war and launch an offensive against Sumy. We've turned the tables, and now we control over 1,300 square kilometers, including 100 settlements. Russian troops fled from several areas in Kursk, unable to face our forces in the region alone. Russia has lost 6,000 soldiers, with tens of thousands more lost in other war zones. Thanks to our actions, there is no longer a threat of a new offensive on Sumy, as was the case in May when Putin launched the assault against Kharkiv. Putin's real goal is clear and should be obvious even to those who could still believe he was at war to protect some of his people or security interests. At the same time as our advance in the Kursk region, the Russian army continues its offensive in Ukraine. The most capable units of the Russian army are involved in expanding the zone of occupation of our territory in the Donetsk region. This is a clear choice by Moscow. Putin wants more Ukraine to occupy than he wants security for Russia. This is absolutely true. So this is to say that Russia or Putin and the Kremlin put more store in Russia taking territory in Pokrovsk than stopping Ukraine taking territory in Kursk. In other words, they refuse to move their best troops from Pokrovsk to Kursk. So that is, I think, prima facie correct. Putin, he doesn't care about Russian land or the people. He just wants to grab as much of our land as possible. Putin has shed so much blood that his red lines are meaningless now. It's time for our joint values to rule the world, not the red lines soaked in blood. We must sustain our spirit, stand for the rule of law, and ensure security for all nations. We do want to end this war. We want peace. We want to save our people and our country. It is Putin who doesn't want peace and is obsessed with territorial conquest. He seeks our cities or the ruins left of them. We need to force Russia to seek peace. We need to make Russian cities and even Russian soldiers think about what they need, peace or Putin, if it is realistic to push them to choose peace. We are operating with a minimum of weaponry. And while we are grateful for every support package, we need more to drive Russian forces out of our land, especially in the Donetsk region. Everyone here understands how important it is for a soldier to know that the front line is not only based on a soldier's loyalty to his country and his oath, but is also on a sufficient supply of weapons. That is why it's important that every support package that is announced is promptly put to work on the battlefield without any delay. So this is one of the big issues that Zelenskyy rightly points out, that there are so many pledges, but often, as we just talked about with the Panzerhaubitze 2000s, that's great, but 18 of those are going to come in 2026. So how can we as allies expedite those deliveries? The fighting in the Donetsk region depends on it. So Putin does not have any achievements there. He will not have any achievements anywhere in anything. I'm grateful to all partners for the fact that NATO summit in Washington was marked by decisions on air defense systems for Ukraine. However, many systems are yet to be delivered. The world has enough air defense systems to ensure that Russian terror does not have results. We have already started operating F-16s. They strike down missiles and drones. They are very efficient, but they are very few. We need a much stronger fleet of F-16s, long-range capability, and this is the key. I'm glad that the US, the UK, and France are represented here. Thanks to our joint courage, we have implemented very important operations, in particular in Crimea, which allowed us to return security to the Black Sea and our food exports. Long-range capability, I'm glad that the US, the UK, and France are represented here. Thanks to our joint courage, we have implemented very important operations, in particular in Crimea. So he's repeated that bit. These operations allowed us to return. Okay, so that bit's repeated. Now we hear that your long-range policy has not changed. So remember, this is what he's saying at the Ramstein meeting. So I wonder if there's any movement on this subsequent to what he's saying. Now we hear that your long-range policy has not changed, but we see changes in the ATACMS, Storm Shadows, and Scalps, a shortage of missiles and cooperation. It's interesting. He's not just saying we have a shortage of missiles, but we've got a shortage of cooperation. This is a bit of a broadside. I think he's getting frustrated, and bloody rightfully so. I think he has got right to say, look, this sucks, guys. We're getting missiles that are slamming into Lviv, that are slamming into Kyiv, and indeed across the border into Kharkiv. Again, those surface-to-air missile systems. And again, the guided glide bombs are smacking Sumy, are smacking Kharkiv, are smacking Donetsk. Why are we not allowed to hit these airplanes that are releasing these guided glide bombs? And it's your lack of cooperation in this that is hurting us. And it's absolutely right. And I think he's right to sort of be a little bit testy here. This applies even to our territory, which is occupied by Russia, including Crimea. We think it is wrong that there are such steps. We need to have the long-range capability, not only on the occupied territory of Ukraine, but also on the Russian territory, so that Russia is motivated to seek peace. I wonder if he's here saying that they're not even allowed to use certain ATACMS on targets within Crimea. That would be wholly bizarre. Finally, Ukraine is ready to produce more weapons, drones, missiles, and more that have proven effective in combat, but we need more funding to quickly produce everything that will bring this war to an end, namely by putting decisive pressure on Russia for real peace. Okay, so and then he sort of finishes there. So really getting frustrated with a lack of movement on the restrictions here. Well, he's going for a multi-pronged attack. So at the moment, or just yesterday, Parliament Speaker Stefanchuk, so the Ukrainian Verkhovna Rada Speaker, urges Mike Johnson, the Speaker for the majority of Republicans in the House of Representatives, he's been urged to lift restrictions on long-range weapons. And in fact, from what Mike Johnson has said previously, and give him his due, I'm not a massive fan of him by any account, but on any measure. But he has actually said that he's indicated that restrictions should be lifted and Ukraine should be able to use their weapons as they see fit. So Speaker of the Ukraine's parliament has met with him to try and do a bit of persuasion. Now, good news for the Ukrainians here if the Harris ticket gets in November in the election. So Mark Kelly, who was one of those names in for a potential vice president, is Tim Walz now, but Mark Kelly, I would have thought, will have something to do with defense or be involved in the administration in a meaningful way, has said that the US needs to reconsider weapons restrictions. Now, I played an interview that he gave on, was it CNN the other day, where he indicated he was up for that. I don't know if this is a change. So let's look into this. So this is speaking with the Kyiv Independent. So it's not that interview. Based on the conditions near the front line and territory Ukraine is currently slowly losing, I think it's appropriate to reevaluate this and consider allowing Ukraine to use weapons deeper into Russia. So this isn't to say he's actually saying they should, but it's about reconsidering, which is absolutely right. This is a kind of soft pressure on his own administration. it's not as hard as to say, yeah, we should be letting the Ukrainians use these weapons. But it is, I think you can read between the lines and think that he's probably up for that change of restriction. I think it's appropriate to reevaluate this and consider allowing Ukraine to use our weapons deeper into Russia, to go after military targets, whether it's supply lines, supply depots, military bases. It's something we need to reconsider. We should always be reevaluating and reconsidering what our role is. I know the vice president very well, and you know what her position is on this in supporting Ukraine. I think you'll see a very similar approach, probably not identical. Okay. Right, this is very interesting because lots of people have been wondering, myself particularly, what a Harris administration would look like with regard to Ukraine. Now, it's not going to be what the, I think, Trumpian GOP approach would be, and I think it's far better on Ukraine. Let's just think about Ukraine, to have a Harris administration rather than a Trump administration, for all the reasons I've given and video content that I produce on that subject matter. But it's suboptimal if it would be to continue Biden's approach, which is being rather scared of escalation. Now, for him to say it's probably not identical, will probably not be identical, is actually quite revealing, and that's good news. It gives scope for there to be a change, but he obviously doesn't want to. They probably haven't worked out exactly what their approach would be, but I think that's good news, because it's unlikely to be less than what it already is. So if it's not going to be identical, then how are you going to meaningfully change what you're going to do for Ukraine? It's going to be allowing strikes like deeper into Russia, like he's intimating there. On the one hand, we've got to be careful about escalation, and we do not want US troops to be engaged with the Russians. It's not a good outcome. We need to try to avoid that. At the same time, Ukraine needs to be able to win. So he's saying, look, I understand the escalation thing here, so we've got to be cognizant of escalation, but on the other hand, Ukraine needs to bloody well win. So actually, I think this is a very good bit of news for Ukraine in terms of what they might be able to expect given a move to a Harris administration. Okay, if that happens. So good news is that here is a test flight of a Ukrainian Su-24 with a new, previously unseen Ukrainian guided air bomb in pair with Su-27. That is to say that the Ukrainians have designed and manufactured their own guided glide bomb, so they won't have to rely on JDAMs and the AASM Hammer from France, although useful as they are, particularly the Hammer seems to be doing a good job. I hope that they've designed and created this to be resilient to jamming and whatnot. So according to the original source of videos dated August 2024, description says the bomber conducts a test flight to test a new guided aerial bomb. Good news there. Right. I found this pretty interesting. Lloyd Austin has apparently said, according to Max 24 at least, with help from several European companies, the United States is working with Ukraine to design and build a substitute for the S-300 surface-to-air missile system and the R-27 air-to-air missile. Interesting. So a couple of things there. One, the air-to-air missile that the Ukrainians use at the moment from their older Soviet-era fighters are not as good as what the Russians use. Same planes, but the Russians got updated planes, better radars than the Ukrainians, and better air-to-air missiles, so they can fire further. So if the US and European companies are working together to create a longer-range air-to-air missile, that will be able to challenge, allow the Ukrainians to challenge their airspace again. If they can quickly get, I say quickly, these things are never quick, but get some technological advances in their air-to-air weaponry and be able to fire at Russian jets without having to get newer Western jets in, fire at Russian jets before the Russian jets can fire at them, then that is a massive advantage. But I don't know what the timescale on this would be. I mean, to create a surface-to-air missile system like the S-300 would be is insane. So anyway, it's not insane, but like there's these sort of things take years and years and years to research and build. But I guess if they know what the S300 does and is, and they've got the components, they've got S300s, they just do a bit of reverse engineering and bish bash bosh, you've got a new version of the S300, rather like they've done with the Bogdana. And if they can put the best minds in the world, European and American minds, into doing this, and maybe they can expedite a production of something really quickly, and that means that they're going to be able to produce their own air defense systems, which is massively, that will be massively valuable. Whether it'll be able to take out ballistic missiles is another question. Okay, and then FPV drones with fiber optic cables for control and video are immune to electronic warfare jamming. We've heard this before. These are Russian drones, and this is something the Russians are using. So this one has a 5 kilometer range on that spool at the back. So that is 5 kilometers worth of fiber optic cable that comes out of the back of that spool. That's insane. You can fit 5 kilometers into that area. And that one there is a 10 kilometer spool of fiber optic cable, and that connects the drone back to the operator so you can control it. It cannot be electronically jammed, but you do have to be careful where you're flying it. No flying through woods and trees, and watch if you're going to double back on yourself. Are you then going to get it? Is it going to get caught on something, and so on and so forth? So you obviously need to be careful how you use these things, but generally, I'd assume that's a pretty good development for the Russians there, and I wonder if the Ukrainians are doing the same, because electronic warfare, the countermeasures on drones is just obviously a huge issue for both sides. Anyway, that's enough of military aid for me for the time being. Let's pop into the live chats and see whether you guys are okay. Do some thanks. So first of all, thanks to good old Richard Bennett, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, my good man, absolute legend. The Weasel, thanks, matey, for your super sticker. Very much appreciated, good man. My British fellow, by the looks of it. Ruben Kuiper, 22 euros. Thank you, Ruben. That's really, really generous of you. Thanks for that super sticker thingy job. Very much appreciate that. And Blonde Bombsheller, gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, Blonde Bombsheller. Thank you for your great kindness. And Paddy Pliner as well. A long time no see, my man. Gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships as well. Goodness me. Okay. So just seeing what you guys have to say. Cheryl. Good old Cheryl Watley. Hey, good to have you here again. I was catching Mark Kelly from last night on Stephen Colbert. I'm going to let you into a secret. I listened to that in the shower today. Yeah, that's what I do. That's how I roll. And I was fascinated to listen to Mark Kelly, and it was good stuff. I feel quite confident that he will be a really great asset to the administration if he decides to be a part of Harris Waltz ticket, if indeed they get voted in. Jason, thank you very much. I don't know whether I'm a Class A drug or a Class B drug, but anyway, Jason Cowley JP is my drug of choice. I'm addicted. Lol. Keep on being awesome, JP. Thank you very much for your kindness there. Right. Okay. Let us go and see what JMT Politico here says. So I would assume they are working on new radars for the Russian jets. Yeah, I hadn't actually considered this before, and seeing that bit that I just discussed with you concerning the development of the R-27 missiles and then obviously the S-300s. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. It'd be great if they have been doing that, and obviously I presume they have. I'd assume they are working on new radars for the Russian jets if they are going to help build new long-range missiles, because the jets now have a range of around 40 to 50 miles at best. Goodness me. So challenging there. Okay. Thank you for that, guys. Time for just some more tea. You've got to love lukewarm tea, or not. Okay. Now, ATP Geopolitics. Some people are hinting you don't give out notifications. Do you? What do you mean give out? Like, YouTube's in charge of notifications, and if notifications don't go, it's because YouTube. I mean, I personally are of the opinion that YouTube hate me. and they so often people complain that notifications don't go out on from my videos or for my videos. So it's really, really frustrating. Nevertheless, you know, we press on, and in fact, I'm going to press on now, and I'm going to move on to the geopolitical. Here we go. So Benny Pie says YouTube notifications are broken, and we had a tip off in the previous video about the live. Yes, so yeah, some people get them, some people don't. It seems to be really hit and miss. Now I'm going to move on to the geopolitical section, and we're going to start with what I have been discussing quite a bit, which is where are we going to? It's this one. Yeah, we're going to start with the whole indictment by the DOJ and the tenant media and these YouTubers and other influencers who have been funded by either indirectly or otherwise by the Russian government. And there's more to say on this. This will rumble on, no doubt. Let me know if you can't hear this, but this is a useful little bit from someone. So this Chris Krebs is a guy who runs a security firm, I think, former CISA director. So he is involved in disinformation and whatnot. Let's see what he has to say.
Yeah, look, the indictment from yesterday, the charging document itself is a fascinating read. I mean, it is this almost, Ludlum-like, Tom Clancy-like story of foreign security services and foreign interests manipulating the U.S. political discourse. But it really all boils down to, as I see it, something I've been talking about for years. It's disinformation, it's propaganda, and it's all about power, influence, and money. Take your pick of those three, something's in play here. And if the Russians are going to drop 10 million into a single outlet for a few $1 million or a few million views, I've got to expect they've got 100 million plus more that is distributed somewhere else. So
this is the huge part of what he says here. This is absolutely vital, right? If the US has found $10 million being directed to a bunch of not exactly like huge now, I mean, they're quite big in their respective ecosystems, but the point is if they found $10 million go to these guys, then, what's going to the big hitters? How's that getting there? Is there influence going in that direction? Are there any other of these almost shell companies that have been set up to allow the Russians to continue doing this? And the idea that he says is that, well, if we know there's 10 million, then there's going to be 100 million elsewhere that we haven't found. And that is worrying.
This is the first shoe to drop, I think.
So that's my next question. How much more is out there? But also, how far did this disinformation go? Who did it get to? Who was able to see it? Do we know that?
And how does it impact the overall information sort of environment out there?
Yeah, so this is what's so fascinating. If you go back to 2016, the majority of the Russian disinformation efforts that were launched by Prigozhin's Internet Research Agency really focused on online social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and others. What we've seen is this evolution now where they've diversified their platforms, and now they're using podcasters, they're using YouTube, they're using fake news sites. Remember, there's a second part of this that talks about Doppelganger, which is it's a disinfo for hire organization that has these pink slime fake websites that look a lot like Washington Post, CNN, and others, and they boost the fake news. AI generated content, videos, images. It's a very, very complex scheme that DOJ, the intelligence community, are working hard to unravel. And it's not just them. It's security companies that have been tracking these guys. I've been tracking these doppelganger guys for more than a year. So I was over the moon with these documents yesterday that we can expose them and start tearing down this infrastructure.
This is so important. I mean, really good news that it looks like that first thread has been pulled, and hopefully that big Russian sweater will start unraveling and they'll be left naked and in the cold. But anyway, let's not strangle that metaphor too much. Let's go now to the next video. I'm just going to show you 2 videos here. So this one is actually Jessica Tarlov. So Jessica Tarlov is one of my favorite human beings. So she's on something called The Five on Fox News. So Fox News, I don't need to tell you this, but I will. So Fox News is your right-wing media organization in the US. That an example of how they skew the, I mean, both sides skew the news, right? So MSNBC will do this, but Fox News seem to be really taking it to the nth degree at the moment, where at the Democratic National Convention, they didn't show any of the 7, I think it was 7 Republican speakers who, like Adam Kinzinger, Troy, who else? Loads of Republican speakers. They didn't show a single one. They didn't report that at all. In other words, they didn't want to give ammunition to Republicans who might be wavering to desert the GOP and go to the Democratic side. So, you know, you've got to watch out how they report this stuff, but the same could be said of everyone, but particularly Fox News, I think. Now, how they're dealing with this disinformation scandal is fascinating. And what they've done is massively downplayed it and claimed it is a big Democratic thing and not a Russian thing. So they're not shouting about how worrying it is. And actually, Jesse Walters here, who is, I do not like this human being, is just gives you a complete reflection of how Fox News are dealing with this. And they've all been given the memo to really downplay this. But as Jake Bro says, all of these Fox News hosts are upset that random podcasters on YouTube were being paid $400,000 a month by the Kremlin, and at Fox they're not being paid for basically the same content. Ouch! Such a good quote there. Now, this is great from Jessica Tarlov. She is awesome.
On this.
Oh, and just to let you know, Jessica Tarlov, and I hope this is loud enough for you. You might need to turn it up a bit. Sorry about that. But she is on this show, The Five, where she is the only liberal and she has 4 conservatives, and they all just harass her the whole time and harangue her, and she holds her own, and she's absolutely amazing, and she just spits facts at them the whole time, and often they just can't deal with it, so they just kind of like laugh at her or try and take it down in other ways. But she is absolutely diamond. She's lightning in these exchanges, and she just, as I say, spits facts. So here she is, like trying to explain the seriousness of the situation.
Okay,
this is really not very loud at all. I'm going to see if I can turn this up, and hopefully it will affect your ability to hear this. So apologies. Let me find my booster. Do I have a sound booster? No, I don't. Where's it gone? That's really annoying. I used to have a sound booster on here, and it's no longer there. I will see if I can find that. I don't know if I can. Just okay, here's your warning. Turn up your computers a lot at the moment. Turn it up, and then I'll say when it's finished, you can turn it back down.
Then on this. Okay. I think that Vladimir Putin wants the guy who stood next to him in Helsinki and says, oh, he didn't do anything. He told me we were just meeting, and he said he didn't interfere in the election at all, even though our own Department of Justice had found that he did. What I find interesting about everyone's analysis thus far on this topic is that you're leaving out the juiciest tidbit, which is that the Russians were paying Tim Pool and Benny Johnson $400,000 a month for a weekly video that would go out to their millions of followers.
$400,000 a month?
Yes, more than Hunter Biden was making.
You know, I'm available too if you want to pay me for that money.
But that's you make a joke out of it, and they have denied that they knew that it was coming from a Russian in that way, but they were getting.
Where did you get that info? Because I thought it was going through. I thought it was going through Lauren Chen. Wasn't it her company?
Well,
and that
it's
it was
that
done,
Tennessee-based company.
And that they hired him as to do something. And
well, they've been doing videos, and these kinds of talking points have been showing up in those videos.
Oh, you mean like talking points like inflation's high?
No, like talking about.
You mean like DEI is bad?
Yeah,
or like
that definitely Russian.
Let Russia have Ukraine. It sows discord, which is the point. That they want people, first of all, to think that life is completely terrible under the Biden-Harris administration.
Okay, let me ask you.
And there you have it. So that was her giving given the lowdown to those the rest of the 5, and as you can see Jesse Walters was less than impressed. And I have to say, Greg Gutfeld there with the glasses on, he was actually taking it seriously, which he doesn't always do. She often gets a massively hard time on that, but holds her own and absolutely, I mean, usually obliterates them. She's great to watch, but it's the real challenge in trying to get news organizations like Fox to take these things seriously and report them seriously and report them as a problem, rather than as they do here, which is, see that they've got an issue within their own ecosystem and then downplay it as if there's no problem and that the whole thing is just some Democrat political stunt, when of course it is not that at all. It is far from being a political stunt. This is very much an issue that has existed since at least 2016, whereby the Russians are interfering with political mechanisms and processes around the world, not just in the US. And it is something that we have to deal with a lot better than we presently are. So anyway, I just thought that was worth sharing. Okay, right, now we're going to move on, and it's interesting to note on that idea that Chris Krebs was talking about, which was that, well, if you get $10 million has been found to have been spent here, you can bet your bottom dollar that there's $100 million or so elsewhere. And Jay in Kiev has a right whinge about this idea in a number of places. So he said, if Russia is paying American podcasters $400,000 a month, just imagine what these guys are getting. You got Russell Brand with Tucker Carlson here in some kind of prayer before they have some kind of talk. So Russell Brand has, since he was done for sexual abuse allegations, has and I'm going to be quite harsh here. It is someone that I used to quite like, actually, but he seems to have gone completely off on one these days. He is now, sorry, I'm just making sure. Here I am. Where have I gone? I've gone to the wrong place. So anyway, what was I saying? I'm getting myself confused because I can't find the right window. Let me put myself on the other screen so I don't do that again. Sorry to mess this up. Okay, so what I was saying is that Russell Brand, since he was done for sexual abuse allegations, it has changed the way his business model works. And this is important. I'm not trying to have a go at someone I don't necessarily agree with anymore. But the idea is that he, so many people are saying, has become a grifter, and he's really playing into his audience, and he's getting embroiled and going down that rabbit hole that I talked about the other day, where you end up just being essentially similar to like Tim Pool, where you are playing to the most extreme MAGA type people, conspiracy theories, etc., etc. And he's gone down that rabbit hole. And last time when he was talking to Bill Maher recently in an interview, he was just regurgitating Russian talking points. And you're wondering whether he is now because he's lost these big jobs on TV and film because he's been embroiled in sexual abuse scandals, whether he's grifting to the point that he's much more susceptible, much more vulnerable to, say, Russian money coming his way. And he still has that massive online platform, and that platform allows him to reach an awful lot of people, which you can do these days. So the way that our media landscape has changed, you don't need TV, and you don't need film, and you don't need mainstream media channels to be able to reach a huge volume of people. You know, you look at the how popular people like Andrew Tate are, and look at how popular Russell Brand still is. And that means that Russia can look at someone like this and go, okay, so here is someone that we can easily manipulate, who needs some money, and bish bash bosh. I'm not making that formal accusation. I'm just saying that this is a sort of person that you could see as a ripe target for the Russian. If I was a Russian propagandist and the Russian, Kremlin disinformation boss, he would be one of my top go-to people for sure. But there you go. Okay, so the DOJ has announced that they're tracking down recipients of this huge operation where right-wingers are paid to parrot Russian talking points and subvert the election. And the RNC member, to her colleagues, so this is someone who is a representative of the Republican National Convention or Committee says, remember, friends, don't talk to law enforcement without counsel. Just trust me on this. So, wow. The idea is that there are some people in that ecosystem who are now panicking. Now, this is where Jay in Kiev, who, he's often has his rhetorical flair like every day, but he's actually right to point out that this isn't just a US problem. So remember, the Russian government's paid influencers program isn't only North America, it's everywhere. I've been telling anyone that had listened since 2014. So remember that guy in Germany, top German journalist who received 600,000 euros from a Putin ally. I reported that way back when that happened. Russian government doesn't only have their paid influencers pushing their agenda on social media, they even make it to the Oval Office. And he's referring to Biden admin allowing a member of the Russian government's paid influencers program into the White House. This is Samuel Charap, leading Ukraine skeptic influencing White House policy, perhaps. There's another example. Maybe he says Brand is a member of Russian government's paid influencers program. So he believes that as well. Russell Brand, that is. Russia's paid Western influencers spent years ripping apart America, providing cover for Russia while they murdered Ukrainians. Let's not leave any of them out. Here he's talking about Western members of the Russian government's paid influencers program are now spreading the narrative that after World War II, the Allies took over Hitler's concentration camps to keep the genocide going. So this is someone called Michael Tracy. Just members of people that are either sucked into that ecosystem or maybe paid up recipients of that money in some strangled way. Then there's Elon Musk as well, not far away from all this controversy. So Musk is getting his daily quota of posting Kremlin narratives out of the way, and he said this back in July in 2023, and just gives an example of how Musk is spreading David Sachs and amplifying David Sachs, who's one of the tech bros, giving anti-Ukrainian screeds. Russia is paying influencers high and low, he says here. Another member of the Russian government paid influencers program tweeting maybe the most ridiculously dishonest Ukraine narrative I've ever heard. So this is Tristan Tate, who's Andrew Tate's brother. Tate brothers at the moment being investigated for sex trafficking in Romania. But anyway, Poroshenko, Zelensky's predecessor, overtook the country in a CIA-led coup that banned all other political parties. Ethnic Russians within the country were furious and wanted political representation. They were branded terrorists and murdered by the Ukrainian one-party state. Putin tried to mitigate this and end the killing for 7+ years. Eventually, he stepped in to save the ethnic Russians in the kill zones. I have no idea why nobody knows this. I can tell you why nobody knows this. It's not true. I live on the border. Many Ukrainians also know this and agree with the special military operation. Just absolute nonsense. But these people are just grifters in this. And Jay in Kiev just gives a massive long list of people. British politicians, he says, Russian state media paid Nigel Farage to push Brexit propaganda. So Nigel Farage was at one point on RT. What about US politicians that are members of Russia's paid influence program? We've got Matt Gaetz here. So this was interesting. Matt Gaetz, this was going back some time, but he said weeks ago, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene and I had the opportunity to interview Tara Reid. So if you remember, Tara Reid was the person who accused Joe Biden of sexual assault, and then eventually she was found to be such a dodgy witness, or she was found to be lacking in credibility, is the phrase I'm looking for, so badly that it all went wrong. And you would think, like either this is true or she's doing this for a reason, and it might be someone like Russia paying her to come up with some anti-Joe Biden story. So she was found to be lacking credibility. And then what happened? She went to Russia. So she's now taken herself to Russia, and that's where she is now. So it looks like that's exactly what it was. Anyway, just before she went to Russia, Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene met with Tara Reid, and he said, I found her to be the most credible witness I've ever interviewed in the practice of law or during my time in Congress. And literally weeks later, she defected to Moscow and is now openly working for the Russian government. So you're thinking, well, Matt Gaetz, Marjorie Taylor Greene, are they receiving this kind of any influence, so on and so forth? So he's got a big old thread ending in this one. So U.S. Senator Rand Paul has not only had his campaign manager go to prison for taking Russian money, but now one of his advisors is indicted as a Russian spy. So this is the news that Symes it has been investigated. Dimitri Symes was indicted, and he was an advisor to Rand Paul all the way back 10 years. And Rand Paul is a US senator, Republican senator, kind of libertarian senator, who is absolutely anti-Ukraine. And you're thinking, what is going on here? And indeed, you can join the dots a little bit more, because Rand Paul's dad, Ron Paul, had his own weekly TV show on the Kremlin propaganda network station, Russia Today. And so, again, it's about joining these dots. It's really, really worrying. Anyway, moving on. Now, one of the main people in the indictment was Lauren Chen. She's this Canadian right-winger that's set up in the US, really, and is one of the big influencers there, and was part of this Tenet Media organization that was then paying, and it looks like she was one that knew the money was coming from Russia as well. So anyway, yesterday a DOJ indictment alleged that Lauren and her husband Liam's company Tenet Media took in over $10 million from the Russian government to participate in Russian influence operation. The indictment also alleged that they participated in a conspiracy to cover up the original source of the funds. So she has now been fired. So as well as having Tenet Media that was then paying all these other influencers, and it appears that she knew this was coming from Russia, she was also contributing to the Blaze, and she contributes to Turning Point USA as well. She's now been fired from Blaze, so obviously it was too much for them. But yeah, announcement, and this is coming from Taylor Hanson, who was one of the smaller ones who is being involved with Tenet Media. Tenet Media has ended up after the DOJ indictment, and I will now be pursuing other job opportunities, so I may continue to report on vital news stories this election season. If you'd like to independently fund my work or think I'd fit in well with at another source, let me know. All help will be greatly appreciated during this transition period. Hoping to be back on the ground, providing you all with breaking news ASAP. So here's a guy that's been found to have been influenced by Russian money, saying, if you'd like to independently fund my work, and absolutely getting taken to pieces below here for like, how about going to, approaching Russia Today, and all sorts of like people rightfully taking the absolute rip out of him. Tim Pool, as I reported, appears to have done a complete 180 shift. And I don't know, as many of you said on the threads, you think that this was sarcastic. It may be. He's got Ukrainian flag up there. I don't know whether this is him saying it, but not really believing it. Upon reflection, I now understand that Ukraine is our greatest ally. As the breadbasket of Europe and peace-loving people, we cannot allow the fascist Russians to continue their crimes against humanity. We must redouble our efforts and provide an additional $200 billion at once. Now, that could well be sarcastic. I don't know. He has got the Ukrainian flag up there alongside the Israeli flag, and it's just difficult to know. He's either done a 180 shift. He's lying somewhere. Either he was lying before when he was saying Ukraine was evil, or he's lying now, or he's lying both times, and he's just a grifter, and now he's afraid of losing his money, or he's just like tongue-in-cheek saying that, but still thinks that Russia's evil. But he does have a Ukraine flag in his bio, so who knows what is going on in that guy's head. Right. Then, as I reported in another breaking news update yesterday, Donald Trump has criticized the Biden and Harris policy on Iran, which includes keeping in place Trump-era sanctions on Iran. Interesting. Affirmed that he would lift U.S. sanctions on Iran and Russia. So he has suggested that he would, and there's no other way of reading that speech he gave to the Economic Club of New York. There's no other way of interpreting what he said there other than that he is looking to reduce the sanctions on Russia. It blows my mind that he would do that, and just shows you how naive he is. In fact, that whole talk there was ostensibly utterly gibberish. I'm going to be doing my US elections update hopefully later. If you want to understand how little he knows about domestic and international politics, like, he was asked a question on what he would do with regard to was it childcare tax credits, stuff like that. His answer was just gibberish. He absolutely doesn't have a clue, is my opinion. But yeah, fascinating to see that he's saying stuff like this in public, getting away with it, not being called out for it. And yet when Biden was sort of stumbling a little bit from a kind of speech point of view, he is being absolutely lambasted by media organizations. Yet Trump is now just splurging complete BS. Anyway, moving on. The US government charges former Trump 2016 campaign advisor Dimitri Simes, as mentioned, with working for a sanctioned Russian state television network and laundering the proceeds. Dimitri Simes worked for the Trump campaign in 2016. Paul Manafort worked for the Trump campaign in 2016, was later pardoned, now working for them again. These are like Russian assets. So it is a story of big old compromise. Right, the US has now slapped new sanctions on Russian flagship LNG project. The US State Department on the September 5th has announced sanctions against 2 vessels and 2 entities connected to Russia's sanctioned Arctic LNG 2 project. And a few last bits here. Once the cash cow of Putin's regime, says Carl Bildt, the Gazprom is now in serious difficulties. So this is the Russian hydrocarbons entity. Key projects are stopped amid record losses, Western sanctions, and China's refusal to sign a new contract for Russian gas. You've also got Mongolia refusing to carry on with that pipeline that's going through Mongolia, although Putin has just recently gone to Mongolia, and I wonder whether that will be reversed. I guess we'll see, but it's not looking good for Gazprom. They made record losses last year. This is where sanctions work, right? So to link these things together, if you've got the prospective president of the US standing up and saying, I would reduce, effectively saying, I would stop sanctions against Russia, then you're like, well, look what sanctions are doing, dude. Like, what you are trying to allow Russia to get back on its feet and finance a war against Ukraine. Like, people that still think Trump is going to be good for Ukraine need to get their head checked. And I don't want this to be overly US partisan political, but as far as Ukraine is concerned, which is what this video is about, as far as Ukraine is concerned, there is absolutely no doubt. And you just listen to his words. There's absolutely no doubt that Trump will be bad for Ukraine. Now, some people, like the other day, I talked about this guy who was saying, I don't know what I'm talking about. And actually, this is Trump being cunning. He hasn't got a cunning bone in his body, that man. He's listen to what he says. It's what he means. He might change his mind, but he'd be changing his mind because someone's convinced him it will be more beneficial for Trump if Trump changed his mind. So anyway. Right, the new UK's new Labour government is intensifying efforts to establish a tribunal to hold Russia accountable for crimes in Ukraine, said Euromaidan Press. The Lord Chancellor, Shabana Mahmood, emphasised the need for urgent action with discussions set to take place at the Council of Europe in Vilnius. So that's good news there, holding Russia accountable for their war crimes. And I've seen 2 more videos of war crimes this morning. One released by CNN of surrendered Ukrainian soldiers being shot and killed, and another one of a single Ukrainian soldier being shot and killed, and it's horrible. European Union continues to issue residence permits to Russians at the same rate as the beginning of the war. Citing Eurostat data, Vostka reports that EU countries would have issued 115,000 residence permits to Russians in 2023. The figures almost reached the level of 2022, when Russian citizens received around 116,000 permits. The leaders in the number of residence permits issued are Germany, Spain, and Cyprus. Interesting. There seems to be a big Spanish-Russian enclave there, or diaspora community. Remember, they were responsible, I think, for killing the Russian pilot who had defected to Ukraine and then went to live supposedly secretly in Spain, but it obviously wasn't that secret, and he was in a Spanish Russian community and was shot and killed. So yeah, Spain obviously have a fair few there. Germany, connections of East Germany to Russia, and Cyprus is a big place for Russian money laundering. A lot of money goes through Cyprus there, so no surprise there. And just a little extra one here: since Elon Musk took over Twitter, its revenues have gone from $4.14 billion a year to $1.9 billion a year, as advertiser exodus has gathered pace, with 26% planning to cut spending. So yeah, not looking good. One of the main amplifying sources of Russian disinformation. Anyway, that's enough from me on those topics. I do hope there is at least some of you still with me. Thank you for being there. Let's see if there's any questions you guys want to ask. Please throw them at me. Yeah, lots of comments on Trump. I won't go down that rabbit hole because because otherwise I won't ever get off it, and you'll just have me ranting here for another 2 hours. But there you go. Yeah, so most things seem to be talking about that. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I don't watch Willie OAM anymore. So this is an Australian YouTuber who was usually pretty down the middle, supportive of Ukraine. And then someone's saying he went away, he went and did a stint in Syria or something around the earthquake around there, did some reporting, came back, and he now wears lots of nice expensive clothing and is completely on the side of Russia. And some people making accusations along those lines. I can't speak to that. I've not watched him for ages, mainly because I have been too busy. I just don't have time. I am operating at like 150%. But there you go. Right. Someone mentioning this is nothing to do with Ukraine. So Brand's wife is Australian. He lives in Byron Bay, more rural area, I think. With wife and kids, or just great growth. He seems to be intelligent, but progressively ranting. Not sure if he. Anyway, I wasn't going to respond to that per se, other than the best kebabs I've ever had were Bay kebabs in Byron Bay in 1996, and I was there, and I loved Byron Bay. Had some really great times there. I don't want to go into too much detail, but absolutely brilliant. I remember seeing Directions in Groove, a great Australian sort of acid jazz band. Their great album, Dig Deeper. They played at Byron Bay one of the nights I was there. Anyway, Byron Bay, superb. Right. None of you need to know that. If there are any questions, that would be fantastic. Let's just give you a few thanks. Throw a few of these out there. Thank you to Suzanne Melendi, gifting 580p Geopolitics memberships. Is really kind of you. Julian Rossiter, always so kind. Thanks, mate. Looks like Jesse Walters has been borrowing some of the Peach Palpatine's bronzer. Good claim there. That's a guy from Fox News looking rather bronzed. David L, thank you for all you do, Jonathan. Thank you for being around, David. Really appreciate your continued support. Johnny Nedregard, with some Nordic love. Do we, the West, have a red line? Where is it, and why is it not in front of the children? If we do have a red line, how can we move it so it protects the civilians? Right, this is a really good question. I have said for a very long time that the West and Ukraine by extension, but the West has been forcing Ukraine to operate to Russia's red lines, which means that Russia get to dictate how Ukraine prosecutes their war. And that means that Ukraine struggled to get the initiative because it's Russia saying, no, if you do this, then we'll do that. And the West being scared and saying to Ukraine, okay, you can't do that because then they'll do that. And so Ukraine just has to go around following the rules that are stipulated by Russia, which means that Russia necessarily has the advantage there because they are stipulating Ukraine's behavior. And yet, no one's thought to actually start placing red lines in front of Russia and saying, look, Russia, if you continue to hit Kharkiv with surface-to-air missiles that are slamming into residential buildings, if you continue to do that, we will allow Ukraine to strike deep into Russia with ATACMS. How about we set some red lines for Russia? And it just blows my mind that that hasn't happened because it seems bloody obvious. And then Russia will go, oh, okay. So then it won't be seen as escalatory. Like if we just out the blue said, right, Ukraine, you can use ATACMS to fire 300 kilometers into Russia and take out some airfields, then Russia will go, hang on, don't do that. That's escalatory. And then we'll hit you with nuclear missiles or something like that. And you can kind of understand that. But actually, if we said, right, Russia, if you do this, then we will allow them to fire into Russia, then you get this situation whereby if Russia do hit Kharkiv, then Ukraine get to shoot deep into Russia. And it's Russia that initiated that. So the escalation was prompted by Russia because we presented red lines to Russia. I think that's really important. Great question there. And something that gets my goat, as you can tell. Thank you so much to Johnny Christensen with some Danish love. He couldn't let his Norwegian counterpart get too much of a show in there. Thank you, Johnny, my good man. Now, Ola, Mitch was with me last night. I didn't get to bed till 1:30 last night. I was doing a live philosophical, biblical, exegetical, historical, skeptical analysis of the Exodus story with my co-author friend, Dr. Aaron Adair. And we had a good old 2-hour, 20-minute discussion about some very geeky things, which you can all go and check out on my Atypical Philosopher website channel. And Mitch was with me there. So Mitch, good to have you here. Have you considered publishing some evergreen Ukraine-related content? Should you actually have some bandwidth to do so? That's a really good question. I would love to do that. I've often thought about what book I could put out to do with Ukraine. I am struggling with mental bandwidth these days. I am supposed to be writing again 3 articles a month for Only Sky. Going forward, the resurrection of that. I've got a book that I'm writing with Dr. Aaron Adair that I wrote most of my part in 2020 and 2021, but I'm going to have to edit that and put that together. And at the moment, I work 100% of my time. Like there is not a spare minute in my day, like, you know, other than some relaxing time with my family. But, you know, you can't say that's spare. That's what I need to be doing and spending time. And so I'm really operating at full speed, but this is definitely something I would consider. I do worry about my brain with my multiple sclerosis. And I was thinking about like all the knowledge that I need to relearn about the Exodus and about biblical exegesis and whatnot, and thinking, I don't know, I have the brain that can write what I wrote even 4 years ago anymore. Like, I do worry about my brain capacity, my issues with cognitive load. So from a personal point of view, yeah, I'd love to do that. I don't know what it would be. Answers on a postcard if you guys have got ideas about what I could write. Thank you very much. Really, really generous. And Rob Tyree says, as a member, give Ukraine long-range weapons now. Yeah, absolutely. And by now, about a year ago. Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. I'm probably going to have to shoot off now. I don't think, unless I missed it, I don't think we got your man Greg dropping in. He said he had really bad coverage. He is at the moment bring those snatch Land Rovers that are kitted out to do medivacs, and they have been kitted out with anti-drone mechanisms and so on and so forth. So that's really good stuff. And I look forward to doing a co-stream with him going forward very soon. So yeah. Okay, so Atypical Philosopher, as someone says, is what the ATP and ATP Geopolitics stands for. Yeah, so here's an example of why you should philosophize. And this is what I did last night. So I thought, I'm going to speak with Aaron. It's been a long time. I got myself a glass of red wine, quite a full glass of red wine, put it here. And because I'm so useless with my arms, I projected the red wine, undrunk. I hadn't even had a sip, all over my walls, all over my second monitor. Like, the whole thing was dripping with red wine. Red wine pooled. I've got books over there now ruined with red wine. It went all over the floor, and now I smell like I live in a vineyard. So I am a complete muppet. So you shouldn't tipple and philosophize. It is definitely wrong. Anyway, there you go. Thank you very much, King Raccoon. Hope you're well. Benny Pye, I enjoyed your live yesterday. Reminded me that I do actually remember junior church lessons as a kid. Really interesting to listen to the evidence against the biblical account. Yeah, that's how I roll. And by the way, if you're interested in stuff like that, I don't really, because I know a lot of you will be strongly religious and whatnot. I have got one of my more recent books, 30 Arguments. If you find that under Jonathan M.S. Pierce on Amazon, it's almost got 100 reviews. It's got 97 reviews. I don't have any of my books with 100 reviews. If anyone wants to buy that book and read it and review it, please do. It'd be lovely. But if you don't like it, don't do a review, please. And Rob Tyree, thank you very much for gifting those memberships, by the way. Really appreciate that. Anyway, thank you very much, everybody. You take care of yourselves. Please continue to support Ukraine in every way you can. We are still trying to get a NAFO truck sorted. It is such a difficult process, and you wouldn't believe the amount of paperwork that's required for the troops. You'd think it'd be easy to say, here's a truck. Do you want a truck? And they go, yeah, we want a truck. And you go, we're going to fundraise. Here's a truck. Brilliant. Thank you very much. It's like they have to get paperwork permission up here to there, and the commander of their unit, and they have to do this and that and so on and so forth. And, you know, finding basically the people that want to receive this and can receive that. And so that is still ongoing. But at some point we'll have a fundraiser going. But in the absence of any fundraiser for me, there are plenty of great fundraisers. Jake Bro, obviously Greg Terry is still going. And so, you know, help where you can, guys. Anyway, in the meantime, look, take care soon. Toodle pips. And thanks for all of your support.